Recording in progress.
So, welcome everybody to here we go. Welcome everybody to another Compassionate Innocence podcast. I am Emily, and one of the co-hosts of the show, along with Kurt Roskopf. And today we have Jennifer A. Whitaker on with us, who's been helping us as of late with this show. She also has her own podcast series on different topics. However, this Compassionate Citizens podcast is a part of the World of Ability Podcast Network and was inspired through Norland out of Chicago and his Compassionate Citizens project. Work down there. So it's been going for a couple of years now. And so if anybody is interested, just to let me know all about Keep Compassion. But I'm going to pass over to Jennifer. Hi, Jennifer.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome in. Thanks for joining us. Are we live, Emily, on Clubhouse?
No, we're not at the moment.
Okay, so please get us on there on both if you can, mine and yours if possible. And I'll go ahead and get this conversation started while you do that. For those of you who are already tuned in, thank you for joining us. If you have anything to share, then please go to calendly.com/Jaws Coffee Chat and get on the Wednesday episode that's for June 28th, 2023 at 3 p.m. Central. And we'll be sure to watch there and let you in, and I'll let you speak too. Today's topic is about mental health related. So compassion can be expressed in multiple ways. And also, there are some ways common to the struggle of those with mental illnesses, such as depression or the flight mode, PTSD, the low mood of people with schizophrenia, and others that are the low moods that make us feel down and often make us suicidal, that can all be different conditions, but they have similarities. And some of the similarities are suggested in cases like my uncle. Some of y'all may have heard me talking about how in January of 2023, my year started off rough because at New Year's Day in the late part after Christmas of 2022, he had COVID, but by the time the three of us in this house got over it, my mom flies to see her older sister. Her older sister passed away in her hands. So here's my mom holding her older sister, and her older sister just dies while she is holding the sister in her hands. She's obviously traumatized by it and by what hurt my aunt. But then I was hurt and other people were hurt too, because she was so loved. She was so valuable. She brought such meaning to the world. And she especially did to my uncle, the one that was her husband from 1996 until 2023 when she passed. And he basically attempted suicide by overdosing on alcohol, intentionally consuming more than his body could properly handle, that somehow put him in a case of pneumonia, and something medical also happened, possibly a stroke or something that we never really knew what, but he could no longer open his eyes. He could no longer sit up. So he was practically a vegetable, even though he was still breathing and he could still talk, but he couldn't even open his eyes. He couldn't even sit up to do anything besides laying in bed, his eyes locked shut, and his hands and lips were the only things he could move. Because of that, a relative, I believe it was his sister, his closest family member, that the hospital gave the privilege to make the decision for him, asked my uncle himself instead of deciding for him. Uncle David. There's a lot of people out there that love to read my books since I'm an author. They love to listen to our podcast and so much more. But I know for myself, even though you could say there's ways that you value me or my productions, my products, or my business, because, some of y'all I see at some of my doctor's appointments, some of y'all I see when I go out in public and to Starbucks and Poochie's and other places like my gym, Lifetime, and so forth. There's some of y'all that have seen me, and I see locally in the part of Houston where I live. But in spite of how many people know me, I personally also struggle with when I get depressed, thinking the world is better off without me. And that is just a very common and strong thought that is very convincing when someone is in one of these low moods. They're not just intentionally being selfish, knowing that taking their own life is the most selfish thing they can, robbing so many people of the different values they brought, that those values would be taken away from the people around them if that somebody decides to commit suicide. And because it's so robbing, people lose a best friend, a dad, an uncle, a brother, so many other values. His two neighbors lost a best friend, and so many other people whose lives he encountered, he interacted with. He could even be the person at the church, and he supported them financially, and he robbed them of whatever funds he used to provide. That's how they could keep their church afloat. As many of us Christians know that the Bible says that we are to give 10% of our income to the church. Well, with him doing that, he robbed the church of a portion of income they used to fund church and to have a church for him to go to. That was his portion he was putting in. So even in cases like that he may not actually know the pastor. He might not know the accountant that's in the background working in the administrative offices for that pastor that's the owner of the church, and so many other people that he may never know, but he impacted because his money gone because he robbed his own life, committed suicide. That means that church doesn't have those funds. You never know when that could have been to make it break it, that then they didn't have enough money to have an accountant, and they're going upside down and their business is going to collapse and there won't be a church anymore. Because there's so many businesses that are struggling. It's kind of a debate right now whether we are in a good or bad economic time, because there's a lot of businesses that are hiring. It seems in at least the area where I live, that's the greater Houston, Texas area, every business on every is hiring. There's enough jobs that everybody can have 2 or 3 full-time jobs in order to fill openings that are job opportunities in our area. Some people think different. So I don't know if it's still other local areas from our local area and how that compares to the national average status of the economy. But still, that situation with the economy is getting worse when someone robs us of a working citizen too. That means we have another company that has another opening, but not necessarily enough people to fill. So companies are hurting because they don't have the skills they need. And all this to say that as simple as he could have thought that this person leaving the world would be no big deal, all of this bigger stuff was impacted. And all of these bigger problems lead us to issues related to what the Project Die Hard is all about. Because Project Die Hard focuses on so many people, mostly veterans, but then they specialize with veterans. But no, mental health is not isolated only to those who are veterans. I'm not a veteran. I have mental health problems. And so it's, even though that's their focus, that doesn't mean veterans are the only ones it applies to. There are so many other people, in addition to the veterans, that battle with suicide every day. There's so many increasing deaths. I mean, yes, now we have not just increases in suicide, but we have other deaths, like the increases in mass shootings. Been more than one per day in 2023, to where we're, by March, we had 147 massive shootings and so many deaths already that were way more than the number of days per year. So lives are going quickly, but we need to do what we can to hold on to our own life, hold the lives of those we love and care about, be there for one another, and show compassion. And like sometimes with my best friend, so we both have mental illnesses. We both go through these low moods, even though the different diagnosis. But at the same time, I'm not a therapist. I'm not a psychiatrist or anybody else special background in psychology to provide help. I do know how to lend ear. Ask her, what's on your mind? Listen, but don't respond until they're done and say, what else is going on? Listen. Then ask, is there anything else bothering you? And then listen. You may be like me, where you don't have a professional background to help somebody. But that doesn't mean that you can't help that somebody by at least just listening. Even though you can't necessarily feed them with feedback, you don't necessarily know the answer and solutions to their problems. There's so much relief that person can get by just being heard. And yes, sometimes listening to them means they vent. But understand, venting is kind of like being angry, but it's not you they're angry at. It's just they're sort of taking it out on you for the purpose of releasing the pressure and then moving on because they're past that episode. I do that with my best friend. She does it with me. And personally, since we're both Christians, when we feel like we just can't figure out what to do about that problem, which is so frustrating, the one listening will ask, "Can I pray for you?" And we actually say a prayer together, asking God for the revelation that shows us what is the resolution or answer to our concern. You know, what's the answer to a problem we're facing or something. And that's not to say that everybody has to be a Christian, but even if you have a different God, it's therapeutic to turn to religion when you can't find a solution, especially when that's to a point that you or the loved one, friend, uncle, dad, mom, whoever, is battling with suicide because of how horrible and overwhelming the problem has been or is at the moment. And those of us that have anxiety tend to magnify it. We tend to see the problem a whole lot worse. Who would impact? A friend, a mom, an employer, a subordinate, a coworker, a doctor, a therapist, best friends from church, somebody else at the gym if you're someone that's physically active like I am. Someone else that you'd rather hang out like, for me, it's Starbucks or it's Poochie's Coffee, or even our favorite cashier at our favorite store. They don't know us as friends, but you never know. You may be the cheer of their day. The good moment is when you're there and you're talking to them and interacting with, asking how their day's going and just listening because they're having a hard day with other customers that are being rude to them. It can be some of the most simple, smallest moments, and people that we think are so far-fetched in terms of not being a close friend, but yet we have the biggest impact on. There are so many people you impact, even if you're one of those that says you don't have any friends, or you have friends but you don't have any family. That doesn't mean there aren't hearts you would break. And people that would then go through what you did, who may not already have depression or may not already have PTSD to have flight mode, but they will, with a traumatic event affecting them of losing you as a best friend, as a daughter, as a son, as a dad, as a mom. And it is the most selfish thing you can do. Robbing so many people of that somebody that somehow makes or has made a difference in their life. And yet, to leave them with the debt, with all of your somehow do something with your house, some way to get in your social media accounts, even though you never gave them a password, and to somehow get in to your computer, to somehow access your bank, to tell them to close the bank account when you never even gave that password. Stressors that come to deal with that. You hurt yourself, they have to deal with all that. In addition to your burial, in addition to the emotions it gives them, driving them into their own course of depression and PTSD. It's not, you're going to rob your whole family of happiness, your support system, whoever it is. And this is where it ties into the Project Die Hard and making people aware of how bad the numbers are and how many people die from suicide every day. And the case is with some like my uncle, he was going through depression as his reaction of losing my aunt back in January. He dealt with it by basically becoming an alcoholic. He consumed alcohol and he intentionally did enough to become drunk and not just a buzz and a little tipsy. And he wasn't happy with his real life. So he somehow escaped into what was some kind of bed world, which was the state of being really drunk, until he decided one day he was going to do something and consume such excessive amounts that he, by his own will, he actually died. Even though it was a couple of days later that they pulled the plug. But then again, it was his own request. No one ever thought to take him to a mental hospital. No one ever thought to call the police and tell them that he was attempting suicide. He was put in a medical hospital, and the medical hospital followed his wish for death. This is a problem that is at least national. People who do not have the diagnosis don't necessarily struggle. They go and just not be diagnosed. Because until you see a healthcare provider, therapist, psychiatrist, or primary care doctor that recognizes your condition, some kind of illness, then you don't know you have that problem, and neither would the police or anybody else that could have called the police to tell them, hey, she's struggling with suicide. Can you put her in a mental hospital? Or can you take her to her psychiatrist? Or can you put her in a day program? So many ways we can get help. And if our best friends know we have these conditions, then, or even your family, the people you work with, so many people that you interact with every day or regularly, even if it's only once a month, like how my social life is with some of my best friends since I'm so busy working. But still, whoever are those people you regularly interact with, however frequent, make them aware of your condition after you get a diagnosis. But to get a diagnosis, you have to see some kind of doctor or a therapist. And if you don't have a doctor, look for a primary care. It's a general doctor and ask him or her. And they will probably ask you questions that have to do with symptoms. And if they can't spot on diagnose what your exact mental illness, they may send you to a psychiatrist or a therapist or both. And those two people will be able to say, what is your condition, and help you through it. But don't rob your friends or your family of someone they love. That's the worst thing you can do. That is the most selfish thing you can do. If you are one of those struggling, Emily, what number can they call or email for Project Die Hard to help them?
Well, the Project Die Hard is mostly veterans. It's the building is for up to 12 veterans, and then 2 veterans and their families. And so if you are a veteran and are struggling in any way, whether that's connected with the transition from civilian life and active duty or anything else, the email is contact@projectihard.org. Contact@projectihard.org. And the phone number is 270-366-6189. 270-366-6189 for the phone number to Project Die Hard. But they are, so Project Die Hard is all about bringing hope to veterans and helping veterans with help they need, especially during transition. They're looking to have facilities around the country. But first we need to get this first one up and going, which is in Wakanda, Illinois. It's a 10,000 square foot building on 20 acres. And they are looking to renovate it to house, like I said, 12 veterans and then 2 veterans and their families. And so if anybody is interested in helping out Project Die Hard, whether that's financially in a donation, volunteering, coming on our Monday Mission podcast that Project Die Hard puts on every Monday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, or in any other way, feel free to reach out and can get you started on that direction. Project Die Hard was started a couple, like 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago. And by Brian Gibson out of Paducah, Kentucky, who is a veteran himself, former veteran. And Jen, it looked like you were going to maybe say something at one point. Is there something you're going to say, or no?
I was yawning.
Okay. So yeah, that's kind of a little background about Project Die Hard.
So how about, is there a phone number someone could call if they are not a veteran but they're battling with it?
Well, I mean, they could probably still call the Project Die Hard number, but they may get referred to other places. There's I'm not sure I know any phone numbers off the top of my head. I have to look, but there is like I think there's like a suicide line.
There's a suicide hotline. There's a suicide hotline.
And then like another crisis.
For listeners.
I'd have to look it up here. I think there's also like a crisis hotline somewhere too.
Where?
I think there's like other mental health organizations.
Well, yes, there's
too.
always there. Another county in Texas, it would be the Harris Centers, which is their government tax-funded mental health clinic. Their social workers would be sent to my house, and they would basically assess us as opposed to being an actual police. But you're still calling 911 to reach this, and that social worker would try to work through the problem with you. And if they can't get you to a point where you have a resolution and suicide isn't your temptation anymore because, oh, I'm just going to go call that person and deal with this problem myself instead of trying to hurt myself to get away from it, or something of that nature, that's problem solving and walking you through it, trying to get you out of suicide. In those cases, they contact different mental health hospitals and take you to one with no charge. But now you'd have to have health insurance, or like in Harris County, a gold card. That's a program for those in Harris County that don't have insurance. If they go with the county's mental health clinic, they can get a gold card. It's just some kind of coverage thing, so they're not charged over a certain point based off what's their income, and that the county deemed that they can afford to pay each day in the hospital or each appointment with a doctor or whoever. And there are people who are in poverty, and those are all 100% free for. So affordability should not be the determinant, at least I know in how the counties work in Texas with the tax-funded mental health services, including hospitals. That's to say, whatever state or county you live in, that at least in the U.S., it may not be an actual call. It may be these mental health service providers that come to our 911 call. But you can still call 911 if you do not know any other number, like the suicide hotline or anything else, and get mental health help. Back to you, Emily.
Okay, so I was just looking up here. It looks like somebody could call 988, the suicide and crisis line. So 988. So like the 211, except this is 988 for suicide and crisis lifeline. Otherwise, I was seeing this other number. So the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. So 800-273-8255. Sorry, the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, 800-273-8255. So there's a couple numbers there for if you yourself or know somebody who is struggling with suicide ideation or crisis, that kind of thing.
How are we doing on the time?
It could probably go a little bit longer yet. But wasn't there something else you were trying to connect with, or am I missing something?
So we went over the project card, we went over my uncle and how I was connecting that with compassion, because committing suicide is the most selfish thing you can do, because we rob people, a best friend, a daughter, a sister, a son, and so many other things. So I hit those angles. So how about what you have to say related to the conversation? Have you experienced anything or seen anything, read about anything related to this?
one thing I missed with one thing I missed with Project I Heard, they'd help veterans for up to a year at the facility. But I guess sort of my connection with this whole suicide issue outside of helping with the Project I Heard and other kind of mental health, the Autism Society, other mental health things, is that this year. One of the people in my autism group who was very involved with the Autism Society and among other things around, died, and not sure if we know for sure, but right now it's being said it was a suicide. And so I guess so it was kind of a shock to everybody in the group and connected with him. As like you were saying, Jen, you don't know everybody that you affect.
That's true. And the problem is that when they believe the world is better without them. And I know that from my own experience that are considered false thoughts. Because depression doesn't give us true thoughts, they give us false thoughts that have a negative perspective on our reality. They're distorted or extremely different than the actual reality. So with those false thoughts, they don't think they're making the world worse off as far as impacting in the negative ways. Often people think by committing suicide, they're relieving the world around them of some kind of burden. It's false, but it's very strong, convincing thoughts we get when we're in those moods, the flight or the depression or other low moods. It's like you're saying, it's not true, but they get those very strong thoughts, and we have to be aware of them and question their accuracy when we have those thoughts, and to learn to realize they are not the truth. So we need to get help when we have those. Go ahead.
Just wanted to kind of everybody know, make sure health is a very important topic that should be really taken lightly. But and to if you need help, and everybody who sees someone who maybe exhibiting the symptoms. Kind of, because with my person January, was the is like the happy, involved with everything. That there are no real issues. Well, then that nobody knew, and then it ends up committing suicide, and he wasn't exhibiting as far as, or maybe everybody else was exhibiting any real, like, obvious signs of I don't know, being depressed, or the whole suicide, kind of that whole realm. But then I think there are people who, well, then they're the people who show signs and actually are a whole thing. Sure, where I was going with that. You just had.
I think you're leading up to I never knew this certain person, how they didn't show the sign, though there are others very obvious in their behavior changes.
Yeah.
So to get back right, you're getting.
Yeah. So I guess you maybe never really know, but to not really say for it to get help when really need help, and if thing is it out, or it's not something is maybe more serious than something. If that makes sense.
Some of the signs that know, or most people don't know, are seclusion. We avoid interacting with people. We isolate, and about my him didn't know there was a sign of depression, or he was already doesn't have a social circle, or is shy. So they prefer being alone in quiet time, their happiness as a gets their the people.
Yeah, this
It would be less someone who's an introvert and already likes being alone than someone introvert and they're spending all their time.
Yeah, with stuff though.
He get isolated, start to withdraw, and take away his time, activities, and time not participating, not attending the group, things like that.
Not that I'm aware of.
So that was the last meeting. Yeah. Well, that means they may have been hard for you to say about his parents and lived with, possibility things, but that's what it was a sign of. Because in the podcast with awareness, people, you can see something. I know they should be concerned about these loved ones, right?
Yeah. For but it's something to think about, and
I think they need to also take it serious. Changer. Ask them what's going on. Well, or what did you do today together for dinner? If they say nothing, then ask. So did you just stay home all day, or what do you mean you did nothing? You try to, because often that's a response to the question when it's basically, I did something. And I've seen people now that say that because they attempted suicide. But whoever you know, hospital, not doing it. At least a regular psychiatrist. A psychiatrist by going to a general practitioner, to a psychiatrist, or some kind of way of getting that. If not necessarily, then maybe a daytime program, or patient stuff saying an appointment with a therapist an hour a week with a psychiatrist 15 minutes per month. I think that's what they do that day. It's something that they did do, and they don't, that's why they won't tell you today.
Getting close to the end here. Then would you like to say anything about your podcast, or how they with questions, or talk with you about?
Everybody for listening. And again, I'm Jennifer A. Whitaker. Also, podcast called where we have 4 or 5 more shows, and I've counted. You can find us at wjensbooksand.com. That's N as in Nancy, S as in Sam, books.com. That's our website. And if you writing, editing, writing, publishing services, production, as a be on our team, be on our team, produce movies, at least writing the scripts, partnerships, or even any other services we offer that you may find on our website. Feel free to by going calendly.com/send more LED./JNS more. Our counseling is scheduled for me team members to acquiring services affiliate program, and you want us to talk about possibly being your affiliate marketer. We work with, if you want to show people. So if you're in question, be on our list. Guests for our show, and we would on what you let us know beforehand in order to on our show schedule the date. .com coffee chat CLEA.com/JA chat. And the Jaws Coffee Chat on our podcast, men's books and more is for me to inquire about affiliate marketing. You can also text us at 346-39-8393. Text only. Typically, it's a phone call because we're making our podcast or shooting and doing other things behind the scenes. Interrupted, call me, say text, respond to text, but call except for and you be available is better. Back.
As I said before, this podcast, the Livability Podcast Network. I'd like to Jen being both to Transforming Media, Zach Clinton, historian of TVs and replaying this on their platforms. You'd have reach out to the questions unless it's or like any of their shows or other shows that we have. This one, several she has. Can always can go the and engineer 50 54 at gmail.com 623 have